Do you think that her claims of lack of inclination and lack of ability are true?
Yes and no, because I can't help but look at this as a political scientist, so I take a comparative approach. And what do I see? I see that in Brazil, which is far more democratic than Sri Lanka, in Brazil, President Dilma Rousseff has initiated an investigation into the crimes of the Brazilian military dictatorship of 1964 to 1985. So it's taken 30 years for this to happen. In Argentina, they have jailed the former military chief.
So then you brought the example of Brazil.
Yeah.
In Brazil, Dilma Rousseff herself was a victim.
Was tortured. Yeah.
Was tortured.
Yeah.
She was a victim.
Yeah.
So are we going to wait for a victim to come into power for an investigation to be held?
Bangladesh, an investigation into what happened in 71 took place in 2011, 40 years. In Argentina, they've just jailed Videla. In Guatemala, they've jailed Rios Montt. But all those have taken decades. It's not that you wait for victims. Some of those people are in Guatemala. The president is the former minister of defense, but he's jailed the former army commander, who was also a presidential candidate, for human rights abuses. So it doesn't take a former victim. What it does take, Najim, is for society to get to the point of wanting to investigate this, and B, for the army to go along with it, because it sees that it has to get rid of the past. And now that takes time. So on the issue of accountability concerning the war, I remain supportive of the position that we took in May 2009, which is not now. But there's a fundamental difference between war and peace. And in peacetime, our human rights record has not been a good one. It's been bad. It's been downright bad. I mean, I don't think that 27 people dead is a drop in the ocean. I don't think that 3 kids, including 2 A-level students, shot dead is a fact of life. Now, war is one thing, peacetime is another. And if you have war crimes committed in peacetime, then there's something going wrong. And if there's no justice, then there is a case for taking it to the next level. Now, I'm not convinced that there is a case for an international inquiry. But then who am I? I'm just a retired ambassador, permanent representative. The international community, and I don't mean just the West, may be convinced that 4 years down the road, if this is what can happen in Valley area, Ratupaswala, and if this is how the regime reacts to it and says, well, maybe somebody from the crowd shot at the armed forces, they think they heard a shot. You know, and there's one guy who had phoned his wife from the church and said he's in the church, he's okay. And the next thing she knows is that his head has been pounded in and he's dead. Now, when those things happen in peacetime, you cannot stop international opinion and the UN institutions from thinking, if this is what they did to Sinhalese, and if this is how they react the next day, then, oh my God, what must have happened to those Tamil civilians? Now, that's a logical shift that takes place. So it reinforces the call for an international inquiry. Now, we can still stop that. There's still a fire break. And that fire break is, as I said, to appoint a strong, credible national commission. Now, there's been a disappearances commission appointed, and I'm sure
the presidential commission.
The presidential commission.
There are two former LLRC commissioners also on that commission to investigate disappearances.
But you need credibility internationally. It doesn't have to be an international inquiry, but it has to be a national inquiry with international credibility. I mean, you need people like Manuri Muttetwegama, Rohan Pereira, I mean, people who are known, who are credentialed outside. Radhika Kumaraswamy. I mean, we've had Manuri and Radhika and people heading commissions. In Sri Lanka, this is not new. We had credible national commissions. Why don't we have one now? Is it because we do not want an independent commission?
That is the question that keeps coming up, because when you see that all these committees, all these commissions that have been over and over again, every time any issue crops up, it appears there is a committee appointed. The public never gets to see these committees' reports because there is, of course, no freedom of information. The public never sees these committee reports.
You
just have committee after committee after committee. So then the question arises: do you really want? Are these committees just a smokescreen? Are they really interested in investigating these incidents? And then you have the issue of coming back to Chogam. What implications will issues like Valley area have on Chogam?
Najim, bad as what you said is, the real situation is actually worse. I'll tell you why. The most important commission that we've had post-war is the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, the LLRC. Now, it's a presidential commission, the report is handed over to the president, the government pays lip service to the LLRC, there's a National Action Plan, there's a website, and so on. Okay? But in movies, you used to have the split screen technique, So while this is going on, there's something else happening, and that something else is also in public view. It's not secret. The army, supposedly the army, I really don't know whether the army thought about it, but anyway, the army presented a dissenting report on the LLRC report. Now, there was no call for any government institution, any part of the state, to comment on the LLRC report. That's a presidential commission. It was appointed, it deliberated, it gave a report to the president. And the government is committed to implementing that. And that is part of the government's line of defense, the LLRC report. But supposedly the army presented a report to the Secretary of Defense, and the newspapers carried this saying, well, the LLRC says that some civilians died, that's really not true, none of this happened. Dissenting from and criticizing
a presidential commission.
What is worse is that this dissenting report appears on the website of a certain ministry. I mean, you can access that. And I did. And what did I see? I saw point 3, the preamble. The third point, and it's in bold type, and I will come back to that in a moment, it says, if the president, or words to that effect, if the president does not ensure the security of the state, he is liable to impeachment. And that's in bold type. Now, what has a remark about the role of the president got to do with a report on the LLRC, which there shouldn't have been in the first place? But okay, there is a report, a comment, a dissenting report on the LLRC. But why talk about the president, and why remind him, I mean, what is this? Telling him that if he doesn't do something, he's liable to be impeached, and that's in bold type, and that's on the website of a ministry. So that's why I told you it's probably worse than what you think. I think that initially there is a sincere impulse to investigate. I really think that even in the case of Valley area, knowing the officers, the army commander, General Jagat Das, I mean, very fine, honorable officers, I think there's a sincerity in their wish to investigate what happened in order to ensure the integrity of the army as a whole. but I'm really not sure about what happens afterwards.
So you think that the initial impulse is there, and that they're very sincere when they set out to do it?
Not very.
But they're sincere when they when they set out, when they embark on it.
Then they get tripped up, or they trip each other up,
or someone's doing the tripping up,
or maybe
as was alleged, as was indirectly alleged by Minister Nanayakkara, someone's doing the tripping up.
Very probably.
But then what sort of implications does that have?
Well, the implications are very bad, not only for the country but even for the army. Because when you do that, when you abort or you undermine, delay your own national mechanisms of cleansing, of flushing out the bad guys, the rotten apples and so on, then the infection spreads, because the message is, look, you can do something, we don't approve of it, but if you've done it, well, we'll kick over the traces for you, maybe. So that's a bad message. But what is worse is that it simply reinforces the international commitment. There's a kind of logic of the two resolutions that we lost in Geneva 2012, 2013. We have to know what's going to happen in 2014. We have to know where High Commissioner Navi Pillai's report comes in.